Hey, I'm Kenneth Wajda. I'm a professional photographer here in Colorado. Welcome to another one of my weekly photo chats. And I want to start by thanking all of my supporters who make these shows possible. Times have been tough for photographers this last year, and your support is probably the only thing I can count on at this point to make it so that I can keep it going and make it raw. And hopefully sometime in the future we'll get the freelance work back to where it was. But at the moment, I'm doing all I can to make content and show as much as I can about what I know about film photography. And if you are enjoying that and can support, please go to supportkenneth.com or hit the Patreon and support with a few dollars a week. That's a few dollars a month. That's a big, big help. All right, so today's show is on the value of trading. So if you're looking to change equipment, upgrade equipment, don't overlook the idea that you could trade. There was somebody who had this Crown graphic, which I like. I was shooting the celebration of the Joe Biden win for the president down in Denver, and I brought one of these. And there was a person selling one of these on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist, and they said they wanted $400 for it. That's a little bit much for a Crown graphic. But I said, well, what about a trade? I said, I could trade you for something. And he said he was interested in a Bronica ETRS, which I had, and I hadn't used much. And I thought I would let that ETRS go if I could do an even trade. And this came with a big heavy metal case, which I don't use so much. I just put it in this old bag that's kind of old retro looking, which I just kind of like the looks of. And it also came with this flash adapter, which for me, this is one of the treats. I get to have this flash adapter. If I can push the button and get it to go on. I thought I knew how to do this. And that gives me a handle. A lot of times people, don't have these. I don't know if this is the Star Wars edition, but it doesn't matter to me. I just like it for a handle. Sometimes there's something to that. And you can actually take this piece off and just use it as the handle if you didn't want to have the reflector for the flash. But from a visual point of view, it might be fun to drop a bulb in there. I have some flash bulbs. And he had this in pristine condition with a Schneider Xenar 135 4.7 lens, which is, I think it's like a Tessar design. Shoots beautiful photographs as far as that lens. And he had a 90 on a Graflex board. So this camera gives me the opportunity to shoot two kinds of photos on the quick. This summer, if I'm outside with some friends and we're playing in the backyard, doing a barbecue, having some backyard games, it might be fun to drop a 90 on and shoot a couple of frames with the 4x5. Or with the 135. The 90 is like a 30 millimeter in 35 millimeter terms, and the 135 is like a 50 or 45 or so. So to me, this is a great deal. I was able to trade an ETRS with a back, a finder, and a lens, a 75 millimeter lens, which I didn't need, and it cost no money. Neither one of us spent any money that day. We just both did an even trade, and it was a fair trade. I definitely feel like this is worth what that ETRS is worth. And it doesn't matter if it's a little bit off, because frankly, the fact that neither one of us is spending money, we don't have to go list our thing on eBay, get cash after they take fees, and then finally go find something to buy. We're all done. It also came with a whole bunch of film holders, which you pay money for these. And it had probably 20 of these inside the box. So you can get deals, and you can get deals on things that you're looking for, especially if you find people who are willing to trade. So you certainly can ask somebody if they have a camera for sale online, hey, are you looking for anything? I have a lot of medium format. I have a lot of 35 millimeter. What do you have a lot of? What don't you use too much that you could use as a trading bargain? When back in the 80s and 90s, it feels like it's so long ago, and they still do them. there's a camera show that happens in Denver twice a year, and it was called off this past year, obviously, but it'll hopefully be back this summer. And it was kind of getting smaller and smaller. At first, it was like years ago, there would be a full giant convention room, and it had like maybe 60 tables full of different dealers from different parts of the country and some locally, just lining their tables with cameras and lenses and oddball things, books, lighting gear, tripods, bags, everything. Back in the 80s and 90s, I remember going to the King of Prussia Radisson or whatever the hotel was, and they happened twice a year there, and you would go there with what lenses do you want to unload, and maybe you'll make a trade for something else. The goal was to go there and leave with something else. Maybe spend some money, but hopefully you can make some trades. And the dealers wouldn't give you what you could get from a private sale, so there would be people walking around with a backpack with a sign on it of what was in there for sale, so that if you were walking along, you could say, hey, I'm interested in that 50 millimeter lens or whatever, and just work a deal out with them directly. And those conference halls were packed. There were so many people at those shows. And I always look forward to them because it was like a giant photo flea market. And they've certainly dwindled in size here in Denver. And I wonder whether they'll continue. And maybe they're happening in other places. I was reading about in Tokyo, where if you're familiar with Japan Camera Hunter, Bellamy Hunt, he has a place where he sources cameras for people. Not so much buying and selling. He pretty much finds out what you want and he goes and finds a way to satisfy your need. But he said there are like 60 camera stores in Tokyo, in his part of Tokyo. And that's a fascinating thing when you think about how just because in this part of the world we don't have the camera shows like we used to have, we don't have the camera stores like we used to have, we used to have a place where you could go and you could buy and sell. There was no online auction. There was no place to go except for the local camera store with your gear, or to these shows. And the shows were great because you could definitely wheel and deal a little bit. You could say, okay, I'll do that, but can you throw that in? And if it's just gear you're talking about, people are more willing to work with you than if it's cash outlay. So whenever you're working with any kind of a trade, always say, well, if I do this, can you also add that? That's a way that people will often agree with you and make the deal work because they're willing to get rid of the thing. They just don't want to put out more money. And for me, this was a great find because I'll shoot this, and the other Crown graphic I have doesn't have the wide angle lens and doesn't have the handle. I kind of like that. And I didn't really want to go out and buy this, but trading with the Veronica, that was an easy thing for me to let go because I wasn't feeling like I was losing anything. So look at the trade. Post that you're willing to trade. And if the camera shows come around in your area, go out and support them. They're important. They're great fun. All right, that's today's photography talk. If you're enjoying these, hit the subscribe button. If you can support, please hit the Patreon. Go to supportkenneth.com. You keep the shows going, and I'll be back next week. We'll talk photography. As always, here's the good light.